So today we'll talk about distress, stress, and stress management. Distress refers to negative emotions, the ones that are about keeping you out of trouble, keeping you safe and connected. So feelings like anxiety, sorrow, shame, guilt, they have something of a punishing quality. And oftentimes we don't really like having them, but we're going to do a little exercise. Okay, so get out a pen and a paper or your notebook. And here I have $10 million. And you can use this to solve all your problems, accomplish amazing things, and have a great time and be eternally happy. So you're just going to do this exercise, which could be a bit unpleasant, but for the $10 million. And all you have to do to earn this $10 million is make yourself feel worse. Okay, just temporarily, just for the sake of the exercise. But what could you do? Okay, so now that you're sufficiently motivated, what could you do right now to bring more misery, more anguish, more suffering, more emptiness, more frustration, more shame and chaos into your life? What are some things that you could do? Yes. Yes, and get caught. Commit a crime sort of sloppily. That would certainly complicate your life in many other ways. What else could you do to make things worse? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes. Millionaires always keep it secret. Tell everyone you have a lot of money, because then lots of people that don't really like you will try to be your friend, and they'll try to get you into things. They'll try to get you to invest in things. So tell everyone about the money. Really good one, actually, because millionaires and billionaires do try to keep that kind of thing private. And where did our catch box go? So I think we throw it back there. Yes. What can you do to make your life worse?
Eat something you're allergic to.
Yes, excellent. Eat something you're allergic to. Eat something that makes you sick. A really good one for me is to take my insulin. So forgetting medication, that's a good one. Works every time. Yes, back there. I think, can you throw, yeah, good. Thanks.
I was just wondering, how does the second one make you feel worse?
The second one, telling everyone about the money. Rich people often try to keep their money secret. They don't show it off, because if people knew that you were rich, they would all try to get a piece of it, try to talk you into investments that be bad investments, that pretend to be your friend. It makes your life complicated. And they try to like mug you, and you need security, and it's just complicated at a certain point.
Okay.
That's why. Yes, throw this down and whoa! Good catch too.
Ingest copious amounts of certain substance, basically any substance.
Yes, intoxication. That's a very good one. Intoxication. You can intoxicate yourself like anything. I saw a few more hands.
Lick someone's nudes.
Sorry?
Lick someone's nudes.
To engage in privacy violations that upset people, and nudes are one of those. You know, gossiping works too. That pisses people off. You guys are full of ideas. I see you're very good at this. Impressive.
You could, what was it? You could cause physical harm to yourself, say crash your car at high speeds.
Yeah, so self-injury through recklessness.
Yep.
Okay, yep, you can have more accidents. Yes.
I don't know, you could use, do you already have the 10 million or are you gonna get it after it? Like, do you already have money?
Make yourself feel really bad, and then I'll kind of reward you for this. So I just want to know what, what your strategies are.
I mean, assuming you had a platform, which I guess you might not be able to, you could like, I don't know, ruin your reputation and like say a bunch of things that are really controversial and then like
Yes.
get
you
ostracized from society. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, you could. So there's a quality there of imprudence. So you're being imprudent, and you're kind of causing conflict that is, I don't know, it's maladaptive. There's no point to it. It's not like you're taking on a worthy cause. You're just making a stupid
Yeah.
drama, right? Conflict. As of now, I don't think the word conflict. I'm gonna go with drama. Needs to be wasteful. Any other strategies that you? Yes, you can see it over
I think I can do
there.
this. I don't want to break somebody's like computer or something. Okay.
Nice.
Does it have to be like something that's visible to everyone else? Because you could honestly just think about things that make you really upset.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, see, you don't even need to put that much effort into it. You can just sort of think upsetting thoughts. What kind of upsetting thoughts can you have? Getting tired.
Death, poverty, I don't know, famine.
So just kind of bad things that could happen. Bad things that you can do anything about. No, better yet, bad things that you can't do anything about. So you can like watch the news and then like there's nothing you can do about it. It definitely makes things worse. Any other hands? Yes, one behind you.
Just specifically with like thoughts, I think of like if you really focus on like comparison, especially like your like negative traits against someone's like strengths.
Yes. And here's a reason why that strategy is so effective, because you're a person, you're a whole parcel, and so is someone else. But when you think about it on a trait by trait basis, there's always a single trait that you have that someone else has like more of.
Mhm.
And you can just ignore their package and the fact that they have less of something else, and it all balances out.
Yeah.
So that's why, yes, engaging in these sort of social comparisons, to comparing self to others, but in a way that sort of focuses on like a single trait without context. That's a really good one. You can always make yourself feel bad doing that. I think probably one of my best strategies, my second best strategy next to forgetting my insulin, is seeking external validation. That's when I want like other people to understand me and what I've been through and my story. And so I tell it to them, but they don't really want to hear it. And then they don't say the right thing and I feel bad about myself. You know that thing? So seeking external validation. When you write a really long email, you might be doing that. Wow, those are good strategies. And I was offering to pay you $10 million to do this, but like, do I really need to do that? Like, are you already doing these things now? For free? Wow. Okay. So clinical psychologist Randy Peterson has a video that I'll post to Brightspace on some of these strategies, and you guys have gotten a lot of them. Another really good one that we missed is not sleeping enough. So sleep deprivation is a strong predictor of depression. Sleep deprivation. Otherwise, I think we did really well there. So your emotions or motivations, they're like fuel, they're energy that you can use to do things, and you can make kind of better and worse decisions about what to do because of your feelings. Okay. So ideally, use that fuel to do something that's good for you, that supports your well-being, or to inhibit yourself from doing something that you know you probably shouldn't be doing. And maybe a lot of those are up here. Okay, those are the adaptive uses of emotions. So everything ultimately comes down to what you do and where that gets you. And so what we did on the board was an exploration of maladaptive emotion utilization, okay, and also the technique of reverse psychology. So now we might wonder, well, how could we use them well? And that brings me to the matter of prudent emotion utilization. So both positive and negative emotions have adaptive value. So what could be the adaptive value of a positive emotion? Well, you see your friend, you feel joy, you know, that keeps you in a relationship with your friend, keeps you doing the things you ought to be doing. Satisfaction for living a good life and having good things in life. But positive emotions, pursuing positive emotions isn't necessarily good. So people who who intoxicate themselves, as you pointed out, people who say take cocaine have really good feelings. Take morphine, that will make you feel pretty good. It's a pleasant feeling. Is that a good thing to do or a good way to live just because it involves pleasant emotion? Well, I think most of us would say no. So negative emotions are unpleasant, but they're not necessarily bad. It's kind of more like the decision you make on the basis of either a positive or a negative emotion, that they could be bad. So negative emotions are part of a healthy emotional life. And if we reject and abuse our negative emotions, then you kind of shouldn't be surprised if they grow into monsters. So think of your feelings like a box of crayons. And maybe you have a yellow crayon when you're happy. There's a blue crayon, and there's a red crayon. And so you as the artist in your life are most creative, most adaptable. You can be of greatest service, and you keep all the colors. You know how to appreciate them and apply them well when you know what they're for. Even the ones that you don't like so much. So emotion utilization goes past emotion regulation. You might have heard emotion regulation, the idea that you have these negative emotions and you're going to like down regulate them. Well, maybe it'd be more powerful if you could use them. Okay, if you could harness the inherently adaptive functions of all your emotions, right, which are inherent motivational forces towards constructive actions. Okay, so the socially adaptive use of anger is like self-assertion. The adaptive use of sadness is support seeking. Okay, assuming that you had a good performance, then you might feel some pride in having done that. So unpleasant emotions have adaptive value. And one of you asked me earlier on, what do I mean by that? I mean, it makes you go do something constructive. Okay, maladaptive is more like you go do something destructive. So pain is a good teacher. It teaches you prudence. There are people who, for biological genetic reasons, cannot feel pain. And they rarely live past childhood because pain tells you about damage or about injury. Someone who can't feel pain might put their hand down so hard that they would maybe break their bone. And then they don't know that they broke their bone. And they keep going through their day like that. Okay, they bite off parts of their tongue when they're talking because they don't realize. One of them recently passed away. I think he lived in Russia. He was 17. He died because he jumped off a roof. He didn't know that was too far to jump. But you learn that because when you were a kid, you jumped down like one stair and you're like, now I'm going to jump down 2 and now I'm going to jump down 3. And then you learn that you can't go much further than that. While you're sitting there, you're actually constantly shifting around because you're putting pressure on your joints. And then you need to keep moving to relieve that pressure. Well, they don't do that. We'll just damage their joints. So it's wonderful that you can feel pain. Okay? Your fear keeps you out of trouble. It brings your awareness to possible threats. And it's the natural companion of courage. It wouldn't be courage if you weren't scared. Your own suffering, and the noun passion means to suffer, is the basis of your compassion. That's your empathy for others. Aren't you glad that other people have compassion? Right? That comes out of their own suffering. That's why they understand yours. Your anger is a gift to yourself from yourself that tells you what you need so that you can go get it, and where your boundaries are so that you can assert them. It's a potent reminder of what you value. So is sadness. It reminds you of your values through loss. Seeing darkness is a skill. It's an important one because there is evil, there is oppression, there is corruption out there. And so if you've contemplated that and you know that, maybe that could be a good thing that somebody knows it. There's evidence that depressed people have an analytical capacity, that ruminative capacity where you try to get to the bottom of something. Well, maybe that could be a strength for trying to address complex social problems. But don't waste it, on silly trivialities, like what you said at a party that could have been embarrassing. There are better uses for that ability. People who feel guilty act more ethically. And if you know that you did something wrong, you might do something about it and find reconciliation. Your own shame is the basis of your mercy, right? Your shame at your own past foolishness can help you be merciful to others when they wrong you in the ways that you once wronged others. And so abolishing and avoiding negative emotions probably wouldn't do you any good. So rather than becoming courageous, would stay fragile. Instead of learning prudence, you wouldn't know how to cope. And rather than learning humility, we'd stay egotistical. There's plenty of adaptive value in your negative emotions. So your emotions are primal instincts that emanate from this evolutionary older part of your brain, the midbrain, your limbic system. But you have developed a capacity for deliberate actions, right? For intelligence, for prudence. In your highly developed frontal lobes, in your forebrain, your wizard brain, it can override what your lizard brain is telling you to do, what you might do impulsively if you weren't thinking about it. Animals act impulsively. They follow their instincts. But you can be more prudent than that. So what you do can be informed by your emotions, but your emotions don't have to direct your behavior. They don't have to run the show. I've often found students struggling to cope with negative emotions. So maybe avoiding submitting work because of anxiety. And behind that thought lies the assumption that you shouldn't suffer, that you should not be anxious, and that success lies in somehow suppressing or escaping or resolving or basically otherwise avoiding the experience of that kind of negative state. And so I find people procrastinating to avoid the anxiety, right? Avoiding the failure instead of learning to fail well. So the concept of distress tolerance gets at the idea that you can be distressed, right? And that doesn't need to interfere with your goal-oriented actions. So assuming that you have reasonable skill, the ultimate predictor of success in an endeavor is simply engagement. It's just doing it. Just go do that thing. So the problem isn't the distress itself, right? It's the active or passive maladaptive behavior that you attribute to the distress. And so resolving anxiety is kind of an inefficient way to address a functional problem that is actually caused by the irrational belief that you can't do something because you are anxious or because you lack confidence. It's more efficient, more powerful to understand that you can do something anxiously. So you can show up in life and bring your fear and your sadness with you because they're part of you. And those feelings are, well, they're trying to help in their primal way. They just don't necessarily know how. And so it's your job to stay in the driver's seat while they come on the journey with you. Right? They're like passengers on the bus. You'll never stop hearing them. They'll always contribute ideas, but they don't drive the bus. You do. So the things that people do to avoid negative emotions can be even more problematic and distressing in practice than simply encountering the original stressor. It can lead to a lot of dysfunctional behavior. So if you avoid studying by procrastinating, you're not going to help yourself in the long term. If you drink alcohol to escape bad feelings, you're going to end up with a lot more of those down the road. So instincts like negative emotions or even cravings, they come at you like a wave. You might feel overwhelmed and you have an urge to go act on it that is, well, impulsive, and it's supposed to be impulsive. But if you stay with it and you hang in there, and you take a few deep breaths, that wave will crest, okay? And then you'll be okay again. You can ride out the wave, and every time you do that, you become like a little stronger and more prudent. So that's distress. It's part of life. Now on to stress. Or what is stress? What stresses you out? I'm curious. Deadlines stress you out. I've probably said a few of those for you. So that's not stress, that's a stressor, the thing that makes you stressed. But yeah, deadlines are a common stressor. What other people might be thinking of us as a stressor? They're physiological stressors, psychological stressors. Stress itself is a process. It's the process by which we perceive and respond to stressors. And what you identified there, deadlines, was a stressor. A stressor is something that threatens you, puts a demand on you. So you have to go deal with it somehow. There are different kinds of stressors. They come in different degrees. So there are catastrophes. What's happening in the Ukraine, it's catastrophic. Then there are major life events, significant life changes. Those are things like the birth of a child, going through a divorce, your first job, a layoff, the death of a parent. And then there are hassles, which are day-to-day challenges. And sometimes if folks are quite sheltered, we can think of and react to hassles as if they were catastrophes. So hassles are little challenges that come up pretty regularly. You know, things like failing a course, that could be a hassle. It's not a catastrophe, and it's probably not a significant life change either. So hassles are small things, and they can add up if you don't manage them, but overreacting to them doesn't help either. Your body's physiological stress response is a function of your nervous system, which we'll learn about in another unit. But for now, your nervous system, which consists of your brain and spinal cords, has two divisions. And the peripheral nervous system takes nerves from your spinal cord to the rest of the body. So it controls your body. And it has two divisions, the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is about voluntary behavior. Like if I want to move my arm right now. Okay, I can say move arm and it will, but I can't say stop beating heart. Just doesn't work. That's because thankfully it's under the control of the autonomic nervous system. That's a process that's on automatic. And this has two divisions. There's a sympathetic function and a parasympathetic function. And basically this is your fight-flight response, and this is how you recover from it. So the sympathetic nervous system mobilizes you for action with stress hormones from your adrenal glands and sugar from your liver that goes into your bloodstream, so you have energy to go, fight the dragon. It'll increase your heart rate and your blood pressure, and it sends energy basically to your muscles so that you can go fight or flight. But it inhibits some other systems that would normally burn a lot of calories because we need those for your fight-flight response. So it suppresses digestion. When you're stressed, you might feel kind of like you want to throw up or like you want to go poop because it's like trying to get rid of that. And it also reduces the functioning of your immune system. And that's why there's a link between stress and illness. And then once you've encountered the stressor and you're calming down again, your parasympathetic division kicks in. And so your previously dilated pupils that are trying to get all the light so that you can see the threats will contract. Your salivation will increase. It's time for a snack. And the functioning of your immune system and of your reproductive system will increase. And your heart rate will slow down. There's also an appraisal process. So there's also a psychological part of understanding stress. So when you see a stressor, well, when you see, a stressor is an event that puts some demand on you. But can you cope with that demand? So is it really something that's going to harm you, or could this be an interesting challenge? If it overwhelms your resources or what you believe your resources are, then you feel distress. But if you think you can cope and meet the challenge, then you feel eustress, like good stress. Still put stress on your body. I mean, you can't live without feeling a little stress. When a stressor first occurs, there's an alarm reaction that's about mobilizing your resources physiologically. And then there's a resistance phase while you cope with the stressor. But what if you keep doing that? Like over time, you'll start to wear down. And there's an exhaustion phase where your reserves are depleted. So stress does suppress the immune system. It works that way because it needs to take the energy away from your immune system and put it into fighting or fleeing the stressor. And so stress is associated with slower wound healing, with increased vulnerability to infections, with decreased vaccination effectiveness, and increased susceptibility to cancer. It wears down your body. So it accelerates aging, triggers inflammation, it's hard on your heart, and it increases mortality. That said, if somebody has advanced cancer, positive thinking probably won't turn around what at that point is a very genetic kind of biological process. Though it might help with their overall quality of life. So stress management interventions will work better for some conditions than others. Advanced cancer, you're looking at quality of life, but it could help with the progression of diseases that are more stress sensitive. Like a good one of those examples, those would be diabetes, because stress dumps glucose, sugar into your blood. So that might have more of an effect on that condition than another one. Your physiological stress response evolved a very, very long time ago to help your ancestors with their fight or flight reactions to stimuli like this, not to psychology quizzes. And so even though we're very safe now, we are provoking this sort of ancient physiological process in ways that aren't really adaptive. So your natural stress response is probably too strong for the actual level of threat that you encounter in your environment, okay, which is hassles most of the time. There's a slide that ran away, okay? So the idea is that bad stress overwhelms your resources and your ability to cope. But if you can cope, then maybe this is good stress. And you might feel aroused and focused. So you have a problem when the demands of the stressor exceed the personal and social resources that you're able to mobilize towards doing something about this stressor. And you have a problem when you can't adapt to the stressor, when you can't or you won't use your resources to respond in a way that gets you the result that you want. Maybe you're not ready to engage with it. Your personal or your social resources might be insufficient. And I wonder if my microphone just died. Testing. Today is like the worst tech issue day I've had in a long time. Can you guys on Zoom hear me? No, I don't think they can. All right, I'll keep going, and maybe we'll have to use the backup recording. Okay, so your resources might simply be insufficient. Often, people underestimate their resources. And sometimes they're not aware of the resources that they have, or that their connections have, or that are out there for the public. And sometimes people don't know how to use their resources. They might misapply or misuse them and make things worse. Or sometimes what you think is a resource is actually something that hurts you. Sometimes you'll get bad advice. Sometimes people turn on you. Sometimes people fall through the cracks in systems. Sometimes people don't have the privilege that means that the system works for people like you. Social workers can help people be more aware of their resources and can help a person use those resources to navigate issues. That's a job that some folks with psych majors like to have. So, how can you cope? So sometimes you have to actually go do something about a problem to remove or reduce the stressor. And that's called problem-focused coping. And sometimes there's nothing you can do. And then you need to use emotion-focused coping. And that's about removing or reducing the emotions. I'd say that even if you're going to take a problem-focused approach, you might want to also use an emotion-focused approach so that you're in the best place emotionally to act prudently. So this is the transactional model of stress and coping. And it's based on the idea that, well, we've seen before, the person makes a primary appraisal. So is this stimulus a good thing for me? Is it a bad thing for me? Or maybe I just don't care. If you think it's bad, the next point, you assess your resources to see whether these are sufficient for you. And if they're not, then you're going to have to figure out some way to, and then you may need to marshal your resources in order to do that. And then once you do cope, you'll reappraise the situation. This model is very famous in IO psychology, and it also owes a great deal to Lazarus's graduate student, Susan Folkman. And there's an academic dynamic in psychology that I want to identify. And it's the dynamic between the male academic supervisor who gets the credit and first authorship and the status and the awards, and the usually female research assistant or graduate student who does a lot of the heavy lifting in conceptualizing the work and researching and in writing, maybe gets paid a stipend or it's an hourly rate that's grant paid, but doesn't get the credit and doesn't get to be first author. And sometimes there's romantic relationships. There's one with like Watson and Rayner is famous in memory research. And I'm not saying that that was the dynamic between them, but I want you to be aware of the existence of that dynamic and what that sometimes means, or often means, for women in science. Big discoveries aren't often the product of one person working alone. They come out of partnerships and teams where sometimes many other people's contributions get written out of the narrative. And so you hear that this, like, one guy had that idea, but that's a bit of a myth sometimes. Too much stress can lead to burnout, and occupational stress and burnout are big topics in IO psychology. And burnout leaves you feeling exhausted, just done, don't work as well. You might feel cynical. You might even feel a bit kind of depersonalized. You might have an impersonal response towards the recipients of your service. Let's say if you're a nurse, you might not feel the same way about your patients anymore. Your teacher, you might not feel the same way about your students as you once did. The cognitive side of stress management refers to appraisal. So how are you thinking about the problem? So some people are more pessimistic and some people are more optimistic. There are benefits to optimism. When you appraise your resources, you might do that well or poorly, but you might not recognize how many you have. Oops. Your responses are not always going to be, well, you make them in the moment and you do the best that you can, and they're often not going to be what you would have done with the benefit of hindsight. And you can forgive yourself for that. Also, we often sometimes overestimate the level of a threat. You've probably heard the don't sweat the small stuff. Okay? And then if and when you do fail, there are also silver linings. And I can say that the worst things that happen to me all come with a lot of learning. And sometimes I feel grateful that they happen because now I know something that I didn't know before. I understand something that I never would have understood otherwise. So you can certainly leverage failures for learning. Control. Uncontrollable threats trigger the strongest stress responses. Sometimes people react to a stressor in a way that we would call trauma. Okay, like a stressor can really hurt somebody psychologically. And what seems to happen with trauma is that it turns upside down the way you thought about the world. Something happens to you that makes you realize that your mental model of the world isn't what you thought it was. Because you didn't know that people could do things like that, and you didn't know that systems could fail you, and you're learning this, and now you don't feel safe anymore. There's a sense of loss of control. And you don't know when it's going to happen again, and how you'll find help if and when it does. So those are uncontrollable threats trigger the strongest stress response. And sometimes that's a matter of perception, and sometimes that's a matter of reality. I find the textbook makes it all about the individual and their perception. So that, okay, some people have an external locus of control, and they believe that outside forces control their fate. And some people have an internal locus of control, and they believe that they control their destiny. And wow, it's so much better to have an internal locus of control. But there's no social context there. And there actually are differences in social power. There are differences in the amount of resources that we have and how susceptible we are to other people's power. So some people actually have less control for real, and some people actually have more control for real. But the text presents it as it's all a matter of perception, and what you need to do is just believe that you're in control. Sorry. But we all have some agency, and we have some capacity for self-control and for making prudent decisions given who we are, what we know, and what we have. So stress will be with you all your life, and so it's valuable to learn some skills to manage it. Your best bets for emotion-focused coping are social support and exercise. Good social support assumes that you have good, mature friends that you can trust. And those people, like if you have them in your life and on your team, and I hope you all do, are a great wealth, right? They're treasures. But as you probably learned before, talking to somebody can go wrong. Like if you talk to the wrong person, maybe if they don't honor your privacy, if they go bosses about it. Like when people tell your secrets, maybe they tell your secret and also some lies too. If you ever had that happen, it's not very fun. So there is an important role for counselors and psychologists there who follow an ethical code. They have to respect your privacy. Personally, I like keeping a journal. That one works for me. Women tend to be a bit better at emotion-focused coping, and men tend to be a bit more oriented to problem-focused coping. They want to go and fix the problem, and men struggle a bit more when there's nothing that they can do. And so they're more likely to have maladaptive emotional strategies, like substance use or aggression, even against themselves. And exercise is probably the best emotion management tool that has masculine appeal versus like journaling about feelings. Self-care is one of the most important ways that you can buffer your personal resources to manage stress. So if you're going to go and fight a dragon, right, or write an exam, you get a good night's sleep first. Right? Have a good breakfast. You will never make anything better by running yourself down. So sleep is really important. Lack of sleep is a strong predictor of depression. And if someone's run down because they're underslept, it's going to influence the way they think and they feel, like a lot. One psychologist of my acquaintance says the first thing he always does is see if his clients are sleeping. Because imagine if somebody comes in for therapy or for counseling, so they feel terrible and everything is awful, and they're talking about all the impossible entangled problems, and the real problem is they haven't slept enough. And so everything seems overwhelming to them. Well, you're not going to solve that problem with talk therapy. You need to go sleep. And there's other things you need, like a healthy diet, hydration, exercise, a reservoir of willpower. willpower is a resource and it runs lower as the day goes on. So if you do have to do something challenging, try to do it when you still have a good reservoir of willpower. And if you put it off, you might be too tired by the time the evening comes around. There's a quote by Mark Twain that I enjoy, and it reminds you not to overestimate your hassles, because the big scary dragon is more like a frog. And if you're going to eat a frog, the best time to do it is first thing in the morning. And if you have to eat two, eat the biggest one first. And then you're done for the day. Also need to make time for your friends and family and all the people who care about you, because you need to keep your allies. We'll talk about neurotransmitters in another unit, but for now, neurotransmitters are an integral part of the nervous system. They're responsible for your well-being, and they are chemicals that your body synthesizes out of precursors that you find in food. And you just look at any of these foods on the list. So let's say serotonin, is a neurotransmitter that has to do with your moods. Well, you find that in foods high in tryptophan, like egg, cheese, pineapple, salmon, nuts, seeds. These are all fruits and vegetables and nuts and high quality proteins. Endorphins, which block the feeling of pain or suffering, is something that you get out of exercise, being in the sunshine, laughing, romance. But what most people eat probably looks more like this than this. And most people probably struggle to find the time to do the things that do make us feel happy or well. So we'll probably spend more time, say, working in a windowless office and commuting. And by the end of all that, you're just feeling tired. And maybe the easiest way to relax is to watch some TV. The average is something like 4 hours a day. That's 9 years by the time you're 65. And there's not a lot of time for friends and relationships. Okay? So the prevalence of people who do all the things you're supposed to do, or some of the most important ones like exercise and eating healthy diet, not smoking, like drink water, it's really, really low. It's something like 2%. So most people are living lifestyles that lead to ill-being. So you have to work hard and actively towards living a healthy lifestyle. There is a subdiscipline of clinical psychology called health psychology, and it's about helping people manage their health behaviors and so that they can have healthier outcomes. And it's also about helping people who are under challenging environmental conditions. So it's hard for anyone to eat healthy, but imagine if you have chronic kidney disease and there's like a whole list of things that you can't eat that are being offered to you at full reception. So you might have a conversation about that with a health psychologist, and we have one in the department. Her name is Dina Lee. Now, we also spend a lot of time being caught up in our thoughts. And as one of you pointed out, a great way to be miserable is to think those thoughts that make you feel really bad. So here's something that I found online, and it was on a subreddit for depression. And this is the account of a young man who's feeling miserable. And I'll just read the first few lines of it. I'm almost 24. I've completely wasted the past 5 to 6 years. I'm in a dark place. I don't know what to do. And he goes on about how he wasted his childhood. He wasted his adolescence. And he didn't learn the skills that he need. And now it's too late. And so it's so terrible. This is a narrative. This is a story. This is an act of storytelling. Stories, narratives, are partly true and sometimes partly false. So when people tell a story, usually some things are true And then there's also a lot of spin and selective reporting. So we make decisions about what themes to bring forward and what information to disregard or to ignore. We exaggerate and we distort. Right? There's a lot of things that keep dropping from that story. As a counselor, I don't really care if someone's self-narrative is true or false. That's not what it's about, right? I'm not a lawyer. No, I'm not a courtroom. The adaptive function of a narrative is that it's a guide to your next action. You do something on the basis of the story, and it's about what you do. This is a bad, maladaptive narrative, right? Because what does it lead to? Being paralyzed by finality. That's not a good story. So one thing that counselors do is help people tell better stories about themselves. That's a narrative approach to counseling. You do not have to be a slave to the stories that your mind can construct, okay? Especially not the maladaptive one. So acceptance and commitment therapy tries to guide people away from what we call cognitive fusion. If you are totally tangled up into that story, believing it, right, running your life according to that story, like it's real, that's called cognitive fusion. Cognitively fused with the narrative, with thoughts. Cognitive diffusion is about stepping back. Stepping back from your thoughts, your feelings, and the stories, giving them some space, being mindfully aware of them, so that you can be like the driver of the bus. And all your thoughts and feelings and all your stories are like passengers on the bus. And they'll always be talking, they'll always be coming up with stories, and they'll always be giving you impulses. And you can hear that, but you are the one that's driving the bus and making the decisions about where to go. And that should be in the direction of your values. There's some metaphors for this. One of them is that you could imagine that your thoughts are like clouds in the sky, kind of passing by. You can observe them and let them pass by without getting tangled up in them. Another one is the sushi train metaphor. Let's see if that'll play. No, it won't. Good. I will post it to Brightspace. So I don't know if you've ever seen a sushi train before, but there's a lot of different plates going by. And imagine that those are like your thoughts and feelings. You don't have to engage all of them. You can decide to let one pass by. And then you can say, yeah, I'm going to take this one. Right? I'm going to eat that plate of sushi. And pick that one up. So you have some ability to decide what you engage with and how you engage with your thoughts and feelings. We spend a lot of time, it's like more than actually half our time, dissociated away from the real world, caught up in thoughts and feelings and fantasies, constructing stories. We get very tangled up in them. And so mindfulness is about bringing your attention back to here and now, which is the only place and time that you can actually do anything. And a quick grounding exercise that you can use to pull yourself back is to think, what are two things that I can see right now? I can see you, I can see my screen here. What's something that you can hear right now? I can hear your clicking of your mice. What is something I can feel right now? I can feel my sweater. What's something I can taste right now? The aftertaste of lunch. What's something I can smell? That one usually takes a minute. But if you do that, you can pull yourself out of your thoughts, out of that dissociated place, and back into the real world where you can actually act and do things. Your textbook points out that people with regular religious attendance have higher well-being, life satisfaction, longer lifespan. So they want you to go to church and not watch porn. It's an American textbook. It has been empirically observed that people with regular religious attendance have higher well-being. We can wonder why, and there could be natural or supernatural explanations for that. We focus on the natural ones. What might that be? Well, there's social support. There's long-term community. Belonging is a psychological need. You don't necessarily get that from like a workplace. They might have healthier behaviors. So Muslims don't drink, and drinking alcohol will mess you up 6 ways to Sunday. As a coping strategy, it causes a lot more problems than it solves. And perhaps they have a better sense of hope or optimism. And that could work out to less stress, better immune system functioning, and better outcomes. Not everyone is religious, and so that's not going to work for everyone. But you will find non-religious people in creedless spiritual groups. There's like one down the road here. It's like a church with no creed. There are people who maintain cultural connections to religious groups and show up and participate. So there's different ways of relating to religion itself. And then there are many other kinds of groups that provide that sense of long-term community, of belonging, and they include everything from like 12-step programs to service-based organizations and other community groups. There are other ways to access those spiritual values that are about a sense of wonder or humility, compassion, and stewardship. Does anyone know what that picture is? You can barely see it projected up there. Yeah, you know it?
Yeah, it's the Earth from like, I don't know how many light years away, but like.
It's the Earth. So it looks like a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. And it's a photograph of the Earth that was taken in 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe. And it was actually a distance of 6 billion kilometers away. And one of the NASA astronomers asked that as it left the solar system, it turn its camera back and take one last picture of the Earth. And that's it. Right? Like there it is. That you can hardly see it. But that's where you are. And where all your problems are. And everyone else's problems. And I find that helps me keep things in context. This picture is a good one to make your problems feel really small. That's the Hubble extra deep field. And it's a small region of space in the constellation Fornet. And those are like 10,000 galaxies, as they would have appeared 13 billion years ago, because that's how long it took the light to get to our telescopes at light speed. But there is, if that cookie doesn't work for you, there are resources to support your well-being at SMU, and so one of them is Counseling Center. And we also have a student health clinic where a doctor can give you a referral to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and that is covered under your student health plan. I believe you have $1,000 that you can spend on mental health services. If you need accommodations, a great way to make life less stressful is to go and get them. And you can do that with the Appraisal Center. Thank you for your attention. Sorry about all the tech issues. I hope you guys have a good reading week, and I'll see you back this Monday afternoon.